So the great thing about our e-app is it engages the client and keeps them as part of the conversation. And that's really important, giving them that amazing customer journey that so many customers want and expect nowadays. So that's a really great feature of our e-app. So I thank you very much for your time. And as I said, we're happy to be a sponsor of Advocates and working with us. And what I ask is next time you have a client that you think that this might fit in, give us a quote, see where our pricing comes in at. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And with that, I thank you, and I'll pass it over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Stephen. That's fantastic info for everybody. I'm really excited about our next speakers that I get to introduce. I think it's extremely timely because it's probably naive to think that we're going back to how things were in the short term. So we all have to get used to more Zoom meetings and better communication and hosting virtual events. So today we've got Peter McGee from Marketing Wealth, which he is the owner of, which backs up his years and years of industry experience in marketing and communications and public speaking. He's going to work with Tyson Villeneuve, who's a friend of mine who he and I go back about 10 years now. Incidentally, our wives have been friends since high school, as it turns out. So Tyson and I have known each other a while. Tyson is the founding partner of the Social Concierge, which is a Vancouver-based event planning firm, doing such high profile things as Dinner on Blanc and the Dayton Cup, and a number of extremely high net worth private events that I find to be fascinating to hear the stories on that side of things. So today we're going to get an opportunity to see Peter and Tyson have a conversation around virtual events. So I'll leave it to you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Unmute myself there. Okay. Thank you very much for those great introductions. And I think I speak for Tyson and myself when I say we're really jazzed to be here and to talk about this really exciting topic. Marketing and branding and events, and how events tie into your personal marketing, your personal branding, is a fascinating topic. And it's one that in my conversations with Tyson, we've very much found a kinship over. It's a great topic, one that we could speak about, I think, forever. And what we're going to do today is, rather than having Tyson give a presentation and myself give a presentation, we're going to have a conversation. The reason for that is we've had several conversations about this already, which were unfortunately just the two of us. You didn't get to see those conversations, but they were fantastic. And while we do have a compass, we have a direction of where we're going with this conversation, the nice thing about having an open dialogue like this is that it can actually go into some interesting places. And so we're really hoping that you do take advantage of that chat feature and send in your thoughts, send in your questions, which, as Philip said earlier, is going to be, all the questions are going to be taken care of and captured by the end. And so we are going to land on some really interesting places, and hopefully go into some interesting places that we haven't decided on yet. So that's the magic of these sorts of events, these sorts of conversations. So what I'm going to do is just kick it off, and Tyson and I are going to have a chat, and let's see where this goes. So the first thing is to kind of nail down what it is we're talking about here. So we're talking about events. So events, virtual and otherwise, because there are, even though everything is crazier than perhaps it's ever been, at least in my memory, and everything has been pretty well locked down, there is opportunity for small in-person events. If you work within the rules and you're very, safety conscious and you take everything into account, there's actually a possibility for intimacy in events, which is a really interesting concept, especially when you're talking about something like finance with clients that perhaps you have clients that don't want to be one of 600 at a venue talking about something as kind of sensitive as their wealth management plans. And so what we want to do is first talk about why are events important. I think all financial planners, financial advisors have, if they haven't hosted events, they've at least thought about it and maybe think something like, well, that's for someone else to do. That's not really how I run my practice. I do newsletters, or I do, really, I'm aggressive on social media, so I don't need to do events. But what I'd like to do is discuss with Tyson why events are important, why maybe for reasons that you haven't thought about, events can set you apart from the competition. Tyson, what are your immediate thoughts on that?
Thanks, Peter. And honestly, that was a great segue into obviously what I hopefully feel is going to be a really interesting and fruitful conversation. But thanks a lot to obviously John and Philip for having us as well today too. I'm super stoked to be here and chat with you guys and have this conversation and continue a great conversation that we've already started. And, you know, I think what's really important when it comes to events and, you know, why events are important, even in the financial industry, no matter what. And, you know, this can pretty much be said across the board is people there need to gather. They have to gather. It's a natural form of communication. There's so many nuances of like language and communication and just expressiveness that don't come through necessarily in a phone call or a Zoom meeting, or, you know, even obviously something that you're doing at a large scale conference. But there's a sense of like personal connection that comes. And there's two types of events that really generally tend to drive. There's one, which are the large scale type of events where tons of people connect at random and the opportunity for organic networking is quite high. And then there are a smaller type of event that are very much more intimate, that are more invitational, they're more curated. And, you know, that's where you generally tend to get that deeper level of engagement and conversation, because you're not trying to go for volume, you're going for basically quality of conversation in that event space. And if you bucket down the tons of different types of events that are currently out there and that exist, festivals, you know, conferences, everything, most of them are really large scale events that are very well known, but the opportunity for that interactivity, that one-on-one engagement is very small because people are trying to hit as many places as possible. But then there's the more intimate types of events. And those are the kind that at the moment in COVID are the only types of physical events that people can really plan for. So, you know, if you look at take these two generic, very, very, very top level, if you had to bucket down events, and there's so many different formats from conferences and again, like sporting events, arenas, concerts, everything, right? But most of those are very large scale that just straight up can't happen right now. And so the only way to reach large scale audiences at the moment in COVID, and definitely for at least the next year to year and a half moving forward, is going to be through virtual events. So what we've narrowed the event sphere down to right now, as it stands, and this is definitely going to be at least through 2021, if not through the beginning of 2022, until actual mainstream events, as we have known them up until of March of this year, are going to be back to full business. And that's kind of what generally government, scientists, everybody is conceding is going to be the reality for the next little bit. Now, where does that leave people in events? And so that leaves us with really only two types of communication that we can still do event-wise: large format, and which is now officially anything over 50, which basically puts most events in that category. And it doesn't matter what style it is, if from a conference, hotel, banquet, or anything, like even a restaurant, like you can't have more than 50 people. And so what's going to be happening is a lot of companies, a lot of brands, a lot of clients, a lot of investors, everybody knows this now, right? That's the norm. And in fact, groups of 50 are probably going to be shrinking in the near future, especially with new announcements as COVID goes into the fall. So you look at it as this is an important time in understanding both the nature of events as to why they exist, obviously for the purposes of networking and deeper engagement and brand building and storytelling, and also interactive and communication, but at the same time, where they're going now and where they're heading. And it's, if you can understand where events are heading and what's at your availability now, you can actually create a solid plan to build your brand and market yourself during the pandemic and break through, you know, what is going to be a very challenging event sphere for the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. And I'll pull out something that you said there that I think is really important. If you're waiting, if you're thinking, you know, I'm going to get back into running events, or if you've never run events before and you think, well, you know, I fully plan to do this, I'm just going to wait until this whole thing blows over, and then I'll start. I would rethink that strategy, because, and I think Tyson, what you've just said alludes to that, being that, you know, if you're willing to put off your marketing efforts, your branding efforts, the efforts to put yourself in the position of leadership and authority, and inspire people to do business with you, and inspire your colleagues to run events with you, if that's the sort of thing you're looking for, really you'll want to pivot your mindset when it comes to running events, and do it sooner than later. Because if you're going to wait until 2022, 2023 to start running events again, there's a very good chance that in that time, others in your field who are perhaps more savvy, I don't want to say savvy, but perhaps more savvy, or have been really leveraging the situation that we're in now, and taking notice of it and pivoting properly, they will be well ahead of you. And so this idea that we're going to hold off, wait until things blow over, and then look to start building our reputation, or building upon your existing reputation by running events, you might go about doing that, but I think you're missing a really big opportunity. And so I think maybe what we can do now is I've just alluded to leadership and authority, and while you may not see yourself as a authority in your industry, so among your colleagues, you might not think, well, I wouldn't be welcomed to a national event as a keynote speaker, so I'm not in a leadership position. You might want to think about leadership and authority differently. Is there a core part of the market that you are speaking to specifically? So have you niched properly so that you are an authority figure, you are in a leadership position for that group? So certainly leadership and authority come out of events, come out of hosting events, being seen as putting your hand up and saying, follow me. One of my favorite speakers is a fellow named Seth Godin, and he says that all the time. He says, pick yourself. And that's essentially what he says. All it takes, there's plenty of people who want to follow you. You have unbelievable knowledge about how to change people's lives for the better. And there's a whole army of people just waiting to follow you if you were to put your hand up and say, follow me. And events are a great way to do that. So Tyson, in addition to leadership and authority, recognition, why throw events? Why would you put budget behind that? Why would you put your energy behind that instead of something else, or in addition to something else? But why do it? Why bother?
Oh, well, I mean, that one's kind of a no-brainer for me.
The no-brainer for us, yeah.
From an event perspective. But I think, effectively, events are incredible tools for brand communication, for amplifying and your brand marketing message. And I think that, I want to quickly touch back on virtual events and in-person events, because there are currently two opportunities. Because what I think is going to be the most valuable to discuss today as well is really, for everybody listening, understanding where these opportunities lie right now. Mm-hmm. And so what I was mentioning to earlier is 50 people or less, people can still technically gather at the moment. Generally, it needs to be outdoors only. So that's why it's going to be increasingly difficult to do that over the winter season, as most people move indoors. It was less of an issue, although challenging over the course of the summer, but now that it's basically colder and rainier in autumn, and, a lot of people are opting to spend more time indoors. So aside from the fact that most large scale events are pushing virtual anyway, even in the wintertime, some of these smaller, more intimate gatherings are going to be pushing virtual as well, just because of the increased potential spread of an indoor gathering. So those indoor gathering numbers would probably go down. And so if you're comfortable from an indoor gathering perspective, there's incredible opportunity to host some super VIP clients, or some potential prospects, or somebody, or people who are comfortable in doing something in person. You can do that intimately, thoughtfully, and get a really, really strong depth of an experience out of it. Because people aren't gathering very much right now, if you can just bring people together, make sure they're comfortable with it, take those safety precautions, set it in a nice venue, put some tables that are together that are like in groups of 4 or 6 max, that people are comfortable, make sure those tables are separated. I was able to be a part of already, obviously in my sphere of work, numerous in-person events over the course of COVID already, and operating and seeing how they work from different companies' perspectives, and working with the governments, working with everybody. But there's a very accepted norm right now of what is allowed indoors and what size of gathering. I'm currently working on an event next week on October 3rd, Saturday night, for the BC Women's Hospital Charity Gala Foundation. It's a big fundraiser. There are private in-home chef experiences that are being purchased at very high levels from high net worth clients that are starting at $10,000 each, that people like David Hawksworth are coming in to personally prepare a meal for 8 guests in that person's home with his catering team. And basically over the course of the event, they'll be able to enjoy the entertainment, the broadcast entertainment, and then have this incredible in-person experience as part of this charity fundraising gala that's going virtual. So what's really interesting in terms of this project is that there's a small, super high-end, super high net worth, very expensive component of the event that allows for these over-the-top, beautiful, highly impactful, small gatherings that have great depth to them, that are very, very memorable experiences. But those are the types of gatherings that, you don't necessarily need to be bidding $10,000 at a charity auction to have. If you're comfortable and you understand how to host people in that regard, you can make those parameters and that type of setting feel comfortable for any potential clients or guests that you have existing at the moment, that you're like, these people need an in-person touch. So that's a good way to do the in-person components. But most of everything now is going to be shifting to virtual, which I think is really important to note. So if you are planning on hosting clients or hosting an event or being a part of an event or sponsoring an event that's in person over COVID, definitely make sure that it is something that is less than 50 people. Definitely, I would say less than 20 or less indoors at the moment if you're going to do anything. But even then, it needs to be something super high end, and it needs to be worth it for you. So it needs to be worth it for the risk. The experience needs to be worth it for the risk for the potential guests, because they're like, man, this has got to be cool. All right, like say theoretically, John's hosting something. It's going to be something really nice, like a nice reception for like 15 people at a beautiful restaurant. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like the tables are socially distanced, and then you've got that in-person moment, you've got that messaging. And I think that there's a really strong way to do that on a tight budget right now as well, because a lot of restaurants are really struggling for business, and a lot of venues are really just kind of fill their space. So whereas a buyout of a restaurant might have been too expensive in the past, or a potential venue for you to host some clients, you could probably go to, like, say, for example, I know the Opus Hotel just reopened in Vancouver. You could probably go there and go, hey, I've got $1,500 or I've got $1,000 and I really want to do this in-person component. You can collaborate with a restaurant and hospitality that brings all that expertise on the back end, do a small buyout with a small spend on food. And normally that would never even come close to their minimum. But under COVID times, you could actually get a really nice venue. So think about places on the Vancouver Island that you might not have been to recently that are great hosting spots that typically you wouldn't be able to get. There's a good chance you'd be able to get them now if you're comfortable hosting for that number of people in a cool in-person environment.
That's great. And you know what? And this is why I love this format of this presentation so much, because I was going to ask you something else, but something in what you've just said, I think has really sparked something in me anyway. And that is, in the past, when you're looking at renting out a venue and thinking, well, how many, we call it bums in seats, how many people can I fit in this venue? How much is this venue costing me? And what's my conversion rate? And is it worth doing this? And then you start talking about, an event where you have 8 people or 12 people or something like that. And you think, oh, geez, well, if I convert one of them, is it worth it? What if I convert none of them? But the sorts of events that you're talking about that are really experience-based, it's not just a matter of filling a room full of people and, saying enough smart things to hopefully convince a number of them to get on board. But what is the shelf life of the event that you're running? How long after the event is done are people still going to be talking about it? Are people still going to have unbelievable feelings when they think back to, this, a hired chef came in and showed us how to make sushi. And it was this incredible experience at a beautiful venue. And there was only 8 of us there. And so while this wasn't spoken about, I felt important. I was one of 8 people that got to experience this. How unbelievable is that? And so anytime in the future that someone brings up, oh, you know, my advisor told me to do this or something, you can't help but talk about your advisor because they gave you this incredible experience. And so that's something that, you know, when you rent out I'll just use an example of a community hall. I'm sorry if people really love community halls, but if you rent out just an open space that has chairs that you can set up, what's the likelihood, and if you're just giving sort of a seminar that talks about corporate class investments or something like that, what's the likelihood that people will not only talk about it, but can't help themselves but to talk about it? In the same way, it's a Brian Regan joke, and he says, never tell a group of people that you've had 2 of your wisdom teeth taken out, because inevitably someone who's had 4 wisdom teeth taken out will jump in and hijack your story. And so that's sort of the same thing, that if you make someone's experience significant enough and enjoyable enough, anytime finance comes up in the future or this industry or just experiences in general, you say, I got to tell you about this experience I went through.
Yeah.
And then apply that to your ROI and think, what would that do to my business if people were out there talking about my business in that way, with that passion? And so I think that it's something worth thinking about when you're looking at the $1,500 to rent out a space. You think, well, I have no guarantee that I'm actually going to get business out of this, but what I can guarantee is that there's going to be 10 people, 12 people raving about me and the experience that I gave them. And that's something that certainly as creatives, I think Tyson and I could say that we're creatives, your brain really starts working on, what can I do to delight my prospects or my existing clients? I know this came up in a discussion earlier with Tyson and I, but Warren Buffett had a video recently with his single piece of advice to business owners is, do whatever you can to delight your customers. Don't satisfy them, delight them. And so when you start applying that thinking to events, and what can I do to blow their minds, to give them something they haven't had before and experienced before, to make them talk about me and my business, what can you do? What can you do for that? And so that sort of leads into, and I know you've talked about the kind of overarching style of events, but what would be great, well, you've just spoken about it a bit, but maybe a couple case studies or just small ideas that someone who's new to running events, or even someone that's run a few events before, but never something this maybe thoughtful, some ideas around what can you do with 8 people, with 10 people, with 12 people, that's not going to cost you, $100,000 to do.
Yeah, no, I think, so if you're going to do something in person, and this can apply regardless of whether or not it's COVID, but if you're operating on a relatively limited budget, and it's something that I always abide by, is it's cross-promotional partnerships for other brands that basically align with yours, or that you would like to see your brand aligning with. And it's also how you can really kind of zone in your clientele. I think one of the markets that does extraordinarily well in boutique events and how they manage their guest list and how they get the best ROI out of them is the luxury products world. I have the great fortune of working with Ferrari as one of my clients, and they never invite more than 35, 40 people to an event anyway. And they have like 8 of their sales team there. And they basically make sure that those guests are incredibly well hosted, but they also know that it's worth the expense to host them because they get a sneak preview of the new Ferrari. They get to do all these things that feel exclusive in terms of access, in terms of, being the first to get to check it out. But they also know that it's worth the spend on that event because they're going to basically be, making $150,000 to $200,000 in profit off of each car. And even if they sell one of them, that event is more than, successful. And oftentimes these events end up with like 3 to 6 vehicles being sold out of them, like every single time. But that being said, it doesn't mean that you need to spend a fortune on it. And this is also where the luxury world is really, really good, because luxury brands love supporting other luxury brands. So it helps save them money on their budgets. And I'm just speaking to this philosophically, but at that Ferrari event, Veuve Clicquot decided to sponsor all the champagne. And that way it was a great brand alignment for Ferrari because Veuve is considered another luxury brand on par. And so they would basically go, of course, it's wonderful to have Veuve. Ferrari didn't have to buy all the champagne. Veuve didn't have to put on the event. These sponsorship relationships, the brand value and alignments there. And there was the same thing with Louis XIII. Like Louis XIII is like $3,700 a bottle, and it's just like they were giving out samples, but the type of person who would buy a Ferrari is the exact same type of person who would buy a $3,700 bottle of cognac. And so the Ferrari team got to get the brand ambassador from Louis XIII to come and do these $400 crystal glasses of custom glassware and do a tasting for everybody. It enhanced the overall experience, but it didn't cost Ferrari another penny. So if you think about how the luxury brands work in micro environments, is how they piggyback and also reinforce the fact that they're luxury brands is through cross-pollination. It's through cross-promotional efforts. And by finding other brands or events that are good for you, that you feel good, because that strategy can work no matter how you view your brand or what your target demographic is cross-pollination in terms of piggybacking on other events or collaboration from an entrepreneurial standpoint is a very good way to, on the cheap, deliver a really cool experience. Because if you're looking to deliver a really cool experience, there's a pretty good chance that there's like 3 or 4 other entrepreneurs or brands locally that are looking to do something similar. And if you can piggyback off what they're doing, maybe by sponsoring the event, maybe by tossing in $500 or $1,000 or whatever your budget can afford, if you see somebody else doing an event or something that you're like, I think that's interesting. I think that speaks to me and my brand and how I think my clients would want to buy products. That's a good potential sponsorship strategically for you. And you can also cross-pollinate that way.
That's incredible advice. And I think it leads to thinking in a more sophisticated way about your brand. So it's not just a matter of, I'm an expert in my field and that is sufficient to attract the clients I want to attract. I really, so as an example, panel discussions, either virtually or in person. Panel discussions are really interesting because if I think, so let's say, for example, I'm an advisor, I'm a financial advisor, and in my off time, I do lots of yoga. And because I do lots of yoga, I jive really well with other yogis. And that sort of thing really appeals to me. I have kind of a fitness and lifestyle brand, and along with the financial component, of course. And then you think, well, what would it look like to an attendee if I were sitting on a panel, or if I was moderating a panel of experts from the fitness and lifestyle industry that, names that people know, or at the very least my ideal clients would know, and I was up there with them. First of all, I actually don't need to know all that much about fitness in order to moderate a discussion among fitness experts, because, we can have a few pre-discussions and sort of know what's up there. And just by having, CFP next to my name, just by being in the financial world and hosting a discussion around fitness, people start making the connections in their mind that, oh, in order to live this life, I need to get my finances in order. And so while it's not a heavy-handed sell, just by virtue of the fact that you've put yourself with this group of people, and Tyson, you've said that these other businesses, these aligning businesses, even if they're not from the financial world, are more than willing to come together to do these sorts of collaborations because it's good for their business too. And so if you put yourself out there and say, you know what, I have this idea. I have an idea to talk to folks who are about to retire, who have wanted for years to really get on top of their fitness. They want longevity in their lives. And it's not going to be a discussion around finance, but I'd like to host it just, on behalf of my company, because I love yoga and I love fitness and kayaking and all of this. And, I'm going to get 3 different big names from the fitness world to have this discussion. And so when people sign up for it, they're not necessarily signing up to learn about preparing for your retirement from a financial point of view, but just by virtue of the fact that you are an expert and you're in this discussion, the likelihood that you're going to leave people with really good feelings about you is really high. That's really good. And it's that idea of reciprocity as well, that, you've given someone an experience, and this certainly can be free. You don't have to charge tickets for this. But you give people the feeling that not only are you an expert, even though you didn't prove that you're an expert in finance during this, you were just there and moderating. But you've given people the feeling that this person is interested in my well-being, and it's jiving with the kinds of things that I care about. And so there's your connection. And so I think when it comes to your personal brand, putting some real thought into who are my ideal clients, who does my ideal client aspire to be, because that's always an interesting question to ask, and how do I market events and sort of craft experiences to that person, the person that my ideal client aspires to be. And when you do that, you can start getting very creative around, what is this event beyond just talking about, here are 3 things you can do to prepare for your retirement from a financial perspective. And so you can get very creative, and hopefully your passion really shines through when you do that. Because if you take a presentation that's been crafted for you or for any advisor at your company by the marketing department at your company, and so it's all really laid out there with the facts, perhaps you are very passionate about the facts and that will shine through, but perhaps not. Perhaps there's something in between that you want to focus on, and when you focus on it, people can feel it and people get on board with that. And while we don't have time today, I do hope there's the opportunity in the future to do something on personal branding, because we are talking about events today, but holy moly, is there ever a lot to talk about when it comes to personal and professional branding for the financial services industry. There's a lot to do, and a lot of fun to be had. So what I think could talk about as well is, and I've just alluded to it, but I'm curious, Tyson, of your thoughts. A lot of the seminars that are run in the financial services industry are very information-based. Very, here are the things you're going to learn. You're going to learn 9 tips to do this. And so when you show up, you've got a pen and paper and you've got a list of 1 through 9 and you fill in and that's it. How can call it average financial advisor transcend mere communication of information? Something that could maybe be Googled, if you Google 3 things you can do to retire well, you get a bajillion articles, lots of good information out there. What would entice someone to come to an event? How do you transcend that? Just a seminar full of information?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there's 2. I want to shift to the conversation because it's a really good question, but I want to really talk about the virtual component as well to events, and I'm going to bring this exact topic back in question right back into virtual, because I think that at this point, the average person is very well familiar with how they would want to invite people to an event if it were to be in person, and how they can drive that value. And I think that that's something that's solid. And if people, I'm pretty sure everybody here listening has been to at least a trade show or some sort of conference or some sort of event, which is also, of course, all these types of businesses are considered, these types of styles of events are very much considered events. But to answer your question, those are events that people are more or less go to with a very specific goal. They're either going to a trade show to learn specifically about something. You go to IDS because you're into design and you want to check out the new designs, right? So if you're going to a financial related conference, obviously personality helps you stand out anywhere and anyway, and that's a whole branding conversation. But the educational platform in that type of environment is very important, because that's what people are going there for. They want to be searched. And so if you're going to do the style of event, though, that's more of a softer sell, which is more around a potential sponsorship or a culture-based event, or something that's unique or a cross collaboration where you're getting entrepreneurial, and getting very creatively entrepreneurial right now is massively beneficial in the pandemic, because the one thing that you're going to find, the more people that you talk to, and I know we talk to a lot of people, Peter, you and I, but I'm just saying, the more people that you talk to, and also from a financial advisor standpoint, and finance is something that everybody's paying attention to right now. And I think that that's something that nobody can understate, is that everybody, because of the pandemic, is looking 5 times closer at their finances than they ever have before. And so the information is actually something that people are craving right now,
Right.
ironically enough, And so if you can tailor any information on understanding that people are going to be stressed through the next couple of years, at the very least, through the pandemic, and that everybody's going through it simultaneously. And so when you look into you thinking about it that way, and everybody's needing to make these adaptations, everybody's needing to learn, that goes for businesses as well as individuals. And so I think that people who work in finance right now and in insurance and are in a huge power position, because most people really want that information right now. And if you can find a very engaging and creative way to distill that educational information that you're used to giving out to your clients one-on-one, but you can either put it together in a package or a PDF, or do something that's visually engaging as well. Or maybe if you're comfortable in front of a camera, do some self YouTube videos or pre-recorded video content that you can have as snippets to kind of also speak to other people, or potentially slide in as a sponsor. That can also put you in a very visible position of authority, because not everybody in finance is going to be doing that right now. And so, to your point, where it's like you become an expert by being there, because people want that information, but they still want it in a way that's palatable and easy for them to consume. I think one of the most important things that we need to also really recognize is that, right now, attention spans are very difficult to maintain with everybody, between the constant news and the pandemic updates and all the adaptations and changes people have to make to their daily lives and their daily schedules, and then their extended families and their immediate families. There's a lot of things constantly coming at people from social media and just news in general. So it's very, very difficult to maintain people's attention over, a longer period of time. And so one of the things, especially when they're watching videos, and so video is basically the king of content right now in our digital sphere. And so making sure that even at the very least, I would recommend recording like a minute to a minute and a half video of just who you are, what you're about, and your basic services, like the quick 1.5 to 3 minute elevator pitch of you. And if you have a website, put that on there. If you have something you can share on it, be like, if you're comfortable, be like, toss up a financial ask me, it's called an AMA. It's like, ask me anything. Maybe set up a segment where it's just like, no question is a dumb question. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We get that you're looking at your finances. We get that you're looking at how your spends and savings are going to change. This is a great, everybody's paying attention to it. So this is a good time to be that purveyor of information, but you need to find a creative way to make it punchy, because get out there and put yourself out there digitally if you're comfortable with it. And I think that you can make a lot of headway in the virtual sphere by having a stronger digital portfolio of your own personal brand.
And I would add to that, if you're not comfortable with it, perhaps ask yourself why you're not comfortable with it, and if you'd be willing to get comfortable with it. Because that's something, if someone's never done a video of themselves, they might think, well, that's too scary. So I would say don't start with live video. Don't do a Facebook Live event or something like that, because that's the ultimate scary for someone who doesn't know if they're any good on video. So take your smartphone, we've all got them, and when you've got a little bit of time, record yourself saying something to the camera for 30 seconds. Just introduce yourself, and then watch it back and think, oh, I didn't know that my eyes blinked so much as I talked, or is that what my voice sounds like, or boy, do I ever stutter, or it took me a long time to get to the point of what I was saying. And just do it over and over again, and you'll get much more comfortable and much more confident to where when you're given the opportunity, or when you have the opportunity to take the opportunity, you'll take it and say, yes, I will do this because I feel confident in doing this. And that, I think, and you really touched on this for sure, is that you want to get your face and your voice in front of people. There's this idea of perceived risk that I talked with a lot of advisors about, which is this idea that I have all of the information that people need in order to live well. Why aren't they contacting me? Why aren't they attending meetings with me? Don't they want what I have? And you sort of need to think about, what is the perceived risk of coming to meet you if they've never had any exposure to you before? It might be a trap. People are vulnerable when it comes to their finances, and perhaps they have misgivings about the whole industry based on, a movie they saw or whatever else. You want to put your face and your voice out there so that people can tune into your rhythm. They can get a sense for who you are. Tyson, you and I have never met in person, but we've now had 3 conversations over video. And even if I just watched video of you talking, I feel I'd get a sense for you. I'd get a sense for your cadence, so that my feeling of risk in reaching out and contacting you lowers a lot. And so when people start registering for appointments or webinars or whatever it might be, you'll see the attendance rate go up quite a bit, because if you've done the pre-work of putting yourself out there, speaking to camera, maybe speak a lot to camera, maybe you do a weekly tip or something where you're talking and people can see and hear you talking, you'll have much more success in really every stage thereafter, in having people attend, having people act on the call to actions that you set forth. And so while it may be tempting to, I don't want to put my face out there, so I'll just put up a PowerPoint presentation and I'll talk over top of it. But really people are just going to see the slides. You might be successful in communicating the information that's on your slides, but you'll be far less successful than you could be at garnering trust and having people feel like, yeah, I'd love to see whatever else this person has, and call and talk and have a video chat and all those sorts of things. So the importance of, yes, your face and your voice, and which I would definitely go about picking up your phone and practicing, because you might think you have an energy that you really think is infectious, and you want people to get a sense of your energy. But if that energy doesn't come across in your video, practice it until it does, so that, folks get a real sense for you and for who you are. So on to the next, unless there's anything, Tyson, that has come up so far that you really want to jump on. And I will say, I wanted to mention, sorry, I'll cut you off. It's hard to keep people's attention. Nobody's left our presentation. So I want to say we're doing something right with this conversation. I can see the same number as when we started. So happy about that. That's great. But
yeah,
sorry,
no, it is. No, it is good news. And I think that, but it's the type of, and that's actually one of the reasons why we changed this formatting, because, it's way more engaging for listeners. Podcasts are huge right now. It's way more engaging for listeners if you can be part of a team of people presenting together, or part of a conversation together, so that there's lots of voices in the room, and it's a lot more organic and it's a lot more interactive that way. And I think that people stick around like that. I think what's really important is that, people, business people, event producers definitely have to do it this way. But a lot of entrepreneurs, business people, and leaders need to also start thinking about how they can think like broadcasters. And, broadcasters, if you're looking for a quick tip of, how you might want to present yourself from a digital standpoint, think of your favorite shows, or think of how the celebrity interviewers do it, like Stephen Colbert on the A Late Show, or Trevor Noah, or, whatever your jam is. Those guys are masters at the quick interview sound bites. They do fun little graphics. Look at the news, CNN has the little tickers underneath, the names and the infographics, all that type of stuff. So if you can add, if you're savvy enough, or if you want to spend a little bit of money and go to a digital graphic editor and go, hey, here's $250. Can you make my video look like something a bit more CNN-ish? With your name underneath it, your designation, some of the contact info, a couple things out there. Think about that, because those are big visual hooks for people. And the other thing that we've done and learned, because my agency, the Social Concierge, we've shifted completely into virtual events for about 90% of our business right now, 95% of our business. So, we basically in the last 4 months, or well, actually 6 months now, I can't even remember how long we've been in the pandemic because it just feels like 2 years already. But we've had to basically completely change how we operate and design our events, and, owning a bunch of different events nationally and producing events internationally, but we also do a lot of consulting. But right away, we knew we needed to pivot into virtual because it was the only thing that would be COVID safe. And I think that this is one of the other things that's going to be really important about virtual events, and also how you brand yourself is, we all know that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I just want to bring this up because at this point, I feel that most people don't need to say we're in unprecedented times anymore. We all kind of get that, there's we're all in this together, like all those types of things. That messaging now seems very passe. So try and avoid that messaging in your stuff, because it comes across as now, oh yeah, Canadian Tire is using it, so I should use it too, kind of thing. It's like, everybody knows that that groundwork's been set. So if you do use that type of language when speaking about the pandemic, it's more marketing gimmicky coming across than as naturally authentic. And I think that's something that's really important, is, being aware of what's going on in the pandemic. It's not like we aren't, but socially is more important than ever, because there's a lot of sensitivities around how your guests or clients or consumers would behave. And a lot of their behavior patterns are actually changing, and they're changing drastically right now. And that's why this not only shift into virtual, it's important for you from an events perspective to understand what a virtual event is actually, because a lot of people still think, you bring up virtual events and there's like, oh, I'm so over Zoom. Zoom fatigue is a real thing. I've done like 8 Zoom meetings today and I just don't feel like doing a Zoom event. And I'm like, no, but that's cool, but that's not what a virtual event is. And then on the flip side, you've got somebody that's like, well, I like virtual events, but I don't have the budget and a VR helmet to put on, and where am I going to walk around, and I don't like, how was anybody going to see me in this full 3D immersive environment? But that's not it either. Virtual reality is a totally different thing. And what virtual events are is this emerging incredible sphere, and it's really important to understand them. Virtual events right now are a $76 billion a year industry worldwide that's supposed to 10x in the next 5 years because of COVID, because all these big conferences and international meeting places and everything, they all have to go virtual because it's the only socially responsible way for large people to gather, and it's the only consistent way for people to gather across borders that is safe, because every country is at a different level, every province is at a different level. And so, like things that you can even do from an events perspective here in BC, you can't even do in Ontario right now, or Alberta, or anywhere else, because everybody's at a different place with the virus. But what virtual events brings to the table as an added benefit, even though it might seem somewhat daunting to kind of dip your feet into it, is there's 3 key things to know about virtual. One, they're not going away, and more companies and brands are going that direction. So look for huge advances in big virtual conferences. So the types of big conferences that you guys might not necessarily go to all the time, like getting on planes and flying across the country for 800 to 1,200 people or whatever, that's a great networking experience. Those types of experiences are still going to need to happen, and they are going virtual. I'm currently working in the real estate world right now, where like developers are putting together massive virtual conferences that were already very successful across North America. But here's the kicker, and this is what's really important to note about virtual events. Virtual events can break down geographical barriers like that. And so when a lot of people are thinking, why go to an event or why do something when all my clients are local? And, it's like, okay, well, say it's like I live in Victoria. I'm only going to deal with Victoria-based clients because typically that's where your clientele would come from. They're geographically bound. But there are 2 things that are very convenient about finance and virtual events, neither of which are they're just not geographically bound, and they're both, and there's universal need and understanding for both, right? Because people have to connect, and they can connect anywhere, right? So I've had people now tune into my virtual events from Honduras, and I'm just like, I don't know anybody in Honduras. And it was like a friend of a DJ who met this person who was cousin who saw the thing, and I was like, yeah, I just thought I'd check it out. And that's something that's incredibly interesting. You can promote something locally, you can promote something from Comox, and you could have somebody from New York tuning into it.
Right.
And that's something that's massively beneficial. So when you're thinking about the benefits of virtual, is you no longer have to think, I'm just going to service my regular clientele. I'm just going to service the people in my area. You now have a completely carte blanche opportunity to go after, because people can invest with you from wherever, right? They don't have to be 2 blocks away. They don't have to be in the same neighborhood. And I think that that's something that's really important to consider as well when you're thinking about, why would I pivot into virtual, and what's in it for me? And this seems like a lot of tech and a lot of confusion, and I don't really know what's going on. Well, there's actually massive opportunity in it as well. And also, it's important to understand the basics of virtual events as before you start maybe signing up and paying to go into these virtual conferences and taking booths on them, right? Because that's going to become the new norm. So just so you.
And you might say, based on that, previously it was really difficult to become recognized internationally or even nationally as an expert in your field. I mean, you need to be welcomed as a keynote speaker at least a few events, and you got to fly off to Toronto and do something and elsewhere. You might say that it's actually never been, I don't want to say easier, but the barriers to becoming a nationally or internationally recognized expert in your field, those barriers aren't there really as they were before, based on exactly what you've just said, that if you have a topic that's compelling enough, and if you put some marketing behind it in order to attract eyeballs from wherever, really, you can have attendees from around the world. And even if you're not selling to 99% of those people, and perhaps it's just an ego thing, but really, I mean, if you think about your personal brand, once you start accumulating those sorts of speaking opportunities and event opportunities, virtual event opportunities, that's something that you can say about you and your business. And it also will expose you to different experts everywhere in different fields, and really grow you as a professional as well. And so this idea, I've always been very fond of the idea that unless you have to do things locally, so if you're, let's say, a barber shop, and really unless you're a very famous barber, people are really not going to travel very far. You're working with a geographic region. Unless you have to be a business like that, why not go virtual? Why not spread your word as far as it can go? Because you have something important to say. You have knowledge, and I suppose this is another thing to think about as well, is you might think that the information that you have, the expertise that you have, is common knowledge. That, everyone knows about asset allocation. No, they don't. They really don't. Even people who are very successful in their own field, whatever that might be, there might be a very successful business owner, may know squat about asset allocation. And you think,
I don't know very much about
you don't know
allocation.
I hope everyone on the participant list has just heard that, because I think you're going to get a whole bunch of emails, Tyson. But that's something that it's called it's called the curse of knowledge, or at least that's the Donald Miller term of the curse of knowledge, that because you know so much about a given thing, you tend to think other people know that as well. You take that as given. And because you think they know that, that influences the way that you communicate with them, and you communicate at too high a level, and you go over too many people's heads. And the idea is that if you're an expert at something, you're on a scale of 1 to 10, you're at a 10, let's say. And our tendency is to drop it down to about a 6 to people who might not be an expert, to people who are not in the know. And really, you should drop it down to about a 1 or a 2. And the hesitation that a lot of experts have is they think, well, that would be patronizing. I don't want to offend them. You won't. Really, you won't. And so you can very easily take that into the world of virtual events as well when you're crafting a webinar, to say, how do I bring this down, not in a way that you're speaking to a bunch of second graders, but really bring it down to its granular pieces, so that understanding happens. It's not just communication of information, but, oh, I really get it now. I really get what asset allocation is, meaning I'll be much more open to a conversation about it, rather than, try to protect my ego, protect the fact that I don't know anything about it. And so I don't want to talk to an expert about it, because then I'll feel stupid, and nobody wants to feel stupid. So that's a little plug. That might be a little bit of a tangent, but that's something worth thinking about.
I was just going to slide in really quickly. you know, you guys are doing such a terrific job, rolling so naturally. I know the topics are going to keep going. I just want to give everybody a quick little bio break. You know, just take a couple minutes. We'll get back to everything in about 5 minutes, but we have a huge announcement. I know I just quickly put on there fundraising efforts for the mustard seed, and I knew we were closing it on 3,000. We actually just got a $3,000 donation, and that puts us nearing $7,000 for year to date, which is
awesome.
just remarkable. So thank you everyone for your continued generosity, support of the events that we've been trying to do and put together for you guys. And again, we couldn't do it without our sponsors, our generous members that are here. And we're all, you know, again, I don't want to, what Tyson said, don't use language that was used in the beginning of this, but we're all pivoting. We're doing this, you know, all in the same fashion. We're experiencing challenges together. But I think this presentation, more than ever, we're trying to be proactive. We're moving forward with solutions, you know, finally, rather than just always being reactive to things. So take a little bit of a break. We'll get back to it at the 2:10 mark if everybody has their marker there. So just about 5 minutes. I'll get you guys to have a touch of your waters and catch back up. But I'll get everybody back on here for 2:10 a little bit so I can run for my own bio break too. So. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you. And I'm going to turn my camera off so no one has to stare at my face while I'm sitting here. Oh, maybe I can't. Oh, yes, I can.
Yes, some background music would be good there, John. That's one thing we talked about for future events, is starting to include some music, and really, we're going to be in our virtual world for a long time. Let's make it a nice experience, right? Tyson, some great comments. I've really been taking notes on, the private events for restaurants. That's no brainer. They're going to need a lot of help, and private room, 8-10 people.
Yeah, I know. Thanks so much. And I think I really wanted to cover off the personal events, which I think are still going on, even though they're fewer and far between. But I know that there's a great depth to them. But I'm also really stoked to also chat about virtual and what to really look for in a virtual event and how those are evolving.
And I might not feel as bad when you're trying to invite the exclusive clients. And whenever I try to post an event, I always get comments, oh, I didn't get invited to that, or I didn't get to go to that. And now with our COVID excuse, everybody knows, well, you can only have so many people at events. So it just can't be, lots of people there. So that's a good comment. All right. Peter's made it back with us. Here we go. So thank you guys again. It has been supernatural. I think you've been going through so many points very easily. Some comments that people have made. Toastmasters definitely helps with avoiding the ums, the ahs, and the buts. So thanks, Tammy, for that one. Kim mentioned no more excuses for not being able to attend, out of town, maybe even running behind or so. You should be able to make it there. No traffic concerns. So some great comments. Please keep them coming. And maybe for the second part of our discussion here, some ideas that you're trying to do. I just put out a question there on, what live events or virtual events are people trying to do out there right now? And you have, Peter and Tyson here to maybe tweak them, adjust them, and give you some ideas and how you can change them going forward. Because these are the pros at it. So let's work with them. Okay, go off to the races, you guys. I'll pass it back over to you there, Peter.
Great, thank you very much. Perhaps a neat place to go now, since we're talking about virtual events and there's different ways of going about them, would be to talk about tactics. We've had some pretty high level, sort of philosophical at times discussion. But if an advisor just thinks, yeah, but what do I actually do? Where do I start? What do I do? What's some advice there? I mean, certainly I would start with attend virtual events. That to me seems a no-brainer, that if you're interested in hosting a great one, attend a bunch and write down your feelings about, well, that one I only lasted about 5 minutes before I jumped off, and here's why. The speakers the speakers did this and they did that, and I didn't feel welcome because of this. And write all those things down, because certainly your preference is meaningful. In these sorts of things, we actually really are all experts, because you attend something and you realize instantly you either love it or you don't, and you either stay or you don't. But to write that down and say, well, what was it that made me stay? What was it that made me leave? But Tyson, what do you think in terms of the first steps that someone should take on the road to hosting a really successful virtual event?
All right, cool. Well, this is going to be a little bit of a three-part answer to your question, if that makes sense. And I think that if there's any three things that I could get everybody to pull from what it'll take to be a successful event producer, or at least in terms of being engaged in a successful virtual event, I think you really need to look at it from three core angles, because there's a few things to understand before I get into these angles about virtual events. One, virtual events don't give people the same level of endorphin reaction as a real in-person event. So you have to check your expectations of how a virtual event is going to make people feel, assuming that it's going to be the same thing as a regular event. It's like, and the reason why I'm bringing that up, for example, is if you're going to be hosting your own, you need to think about the broadcast. And so the broadcast component is the first of the three core elements of what it takes to host a solid virtual interactive experience. And so that broadcast element right now, it's us, it's Zoom. So that broadcast is whatever the core messaging is and what the content is. And right now, content is king. It is so important that you take the time to think about your content before you start putting it out there in a virtual event, if you're hosting it or if you're doing anything. But effectively, your broadcast is what the source material is. So that could be, you know, a YouTube video pre-recorded. It could be something on Vimeo. It could be something on Facebook. It could be something on Twitch. You know, it can, and understanding that broadcast platform, the one that you're most comfortable with using, the one that you would like to engage with the most, if that's the one that's going to be the most easy for you to start doing something and hosting your own types of, like, you know, seminars or virtual experiences, or these types of thought leadership type experiences where a lot of people with different ideas and opinions come together, or informational style sessions with engagement, you need to think about how that content is going to come across and what that content is going to be. So you need to start thinking like a broadcaster. And it's like, can I watch this for 30 minutes without changing the channel? Can I watch this for even literally 3 minutes without changing the channel? And you need to think about how quick those cuts go back and forth for your content and how you're going to manage it. So broadcast is basically, that's the content. That's what you're putting out there, the messaging. And it doesn't all have to be live. Some of it can be pre-recorded and then put together. So it's much like how, you know, when you're doing presentation shares, you know, it's like we've got, you know, the demo, you've got basically like a slideshow. Instead of doing a slideshow, you can still also screen share a video. You know what I mean? You can do the exact same thing. So if you have a pre-recorded cool video message or anything that you want to put in there, you can think about how you get that content. And that's why it's really good to practice those types of pre-recorded videos, because a lot of that is, you know, a lot of that is very much accepted as the norm right now. People are used to seeing people as we are, zooming from their homes, zooming from their phones, wherever they're available. You know, that sense of authenticity comes with that, which I think is really nice. And people get into that as totally acceptable and refreshing. So don't feel like you need to build a big studio. But that being said, the second component of what makes a really great virtual event is that setting. It's that backdrop. And, you know, it's what you would theoretically go as your stage design, your stage set. So if you think about your backdrop as a stage set and a stage design, how can you plan, if you're going to be hosting your own, something interesting and engaging? And if it's a thought leadership conference or it's a speaker style of event, what can you do behind you that will, one, potentially put your brand up? So is it a super clean, minimal? How is your brand represented? Is it clean and minimal? Do you just have like a logo with like your own backdrop done, custom done, and you put that as your Zoom backdrop and that's it? Or, you know, as events get more and more complicated and more sophisticated, people are going to expect more elaborate or at least physical backdrops. You look at a lot of the politicians right now who are being interviewed, they're strategically placing bookcases behind themselves, so filled with books. They're aware of how their knickknacks look on the pieces. So all these types of things help build and play into your own brand, right? And you don't need to necessarily, you know, create and, you know, I mean, I'm at the stage in our agency, and what we do is we build actual full out stage set designs that people broadcast from, and we use very like high-end equipment and everything like that, because, you know, our clients have the budget to do that. But philosophically, if you're not spending all the money, you can still achieve a similar effect by thinking about what your stage is going to look like, or what your broadcast center is going to look like. And that can be your living room, your home, a setting that you're comfortable in. Maybe it's a restaurant backdrop. Maybe it's a hotel space that you like. You know, whatever room that you are comfortable in hosting from, that's super important to think about as well if you're going to do something virtual, and how that back end also connects to the third component, which is really important, which is the interactivity. Now, the interactivity is what takes and elevates a virtual meeting to an actual event. And I think that that's something that's really important, because at events, you don't typically just walk in, you don't sit there and just listen to somebody without moving. It's the interactivity that's the component. So how are people engaging in that virtual sphere? Right now, we've got a chat room going so people can engage. If they want to ask questions, this is great. This is the type of interactivity that's required to also keep people's attention. You know, if they're just sitting there listening to us talking, but they can't ask questions, oh, they might not stay that long. So these chat features are really important. Now, this is a very basic level of what you would call the multiple pillars of a broadcast event. You know, we know where we're coming from, we know what we're talking about, our stages are set, we've got the interactivity components with the chat, you know, that stuff is really cool. So you need to think about your content, what you're talking about, what your setting's gonna look like, and what those interactive elements are gonna be. And that, if you break down all of it, are the core 3 pillars that you need to be thinking about. You think about how people are gonna be engaging at home, which is really, really important. You know, it's like, what's their comfort level at? You know, and what are the other elements of interactivity that you can potentially engage with them if this is planned at home that can tie into what you're doing in the broadcast, right? So you've got your broadcast center and your stage, you've got your interactivity, you've got your at-home elements if they're there. And those at-home elements can be everything from like takeout delivery dinner kits, paired wine, bottles of champagne, little gift boxes, like all these types of things that can actually be combined to create a very effective brand experience. And they're small touches. So say, for example, you're hosting an event and you want to put your own on, and you're sitting there going, I don't have a huge budget, but you know, I want to try and reach as many people as possible. You do send out your invitation, send it all out via email, make sure you know what you're going to talk about, make sure you have a planned run of show, make sure that you have interspersed breaks like Philip's doing, you know what I mean? So people can refresh. Make sure that you have some fun engagement aspects. Somebody tossed up there about Philip, about the door prizes and best questions, best comments. Those are all super, super good things to do, because those are elements that you can use to like keep engagement at a fun level. Because ultimately what you want to try and do is create a sense of fun and engagement and something that's memorable. Now, it's the engagement that keeps it memorable as well, right? People learn and retain more when they're doing things and actively participating. So those types of elements are really important to think about.
Great. And I'd put that out there as well. Even if someone doesn't participate in a comment section, there's still an element of a dynamic experience by knowing that there are live questions coming in. So there's an element that you really are participating in something, or you're at the very least witnessing something that is live and dynamic and with interaction that also elevates your experience, even if you're not going to put a comment in the box, which is absolutely fine. And I would say as well, you know, we have 4 or 5 people right now with kind of different roles. There's the 2 of us. There's John and Philip sort of running things behind the scenes. And so an advisor might think, well, I don't have a team of 4 people and I don't really want to hire, you know, some students or something to run things behind the scenes. And it's just me. Well, you can do cool things just with you as well. So you had mentioned, Tyson, about doing pre-recorded video. So here's an idea. You pre-record a seminar on a given topic. Throughout the pre-recorded seminar, you say things like, make sure if you have a question to put it in the chat box and we will, we'll make sure that we address it. So at the time that you do your event, you hit play on your pre-recorded video. And while you're doing that, you are sitting there, just you, monitoring the chat box and answering questions as they come. So you need to be able to say, you know, be sure to put your questions in the box. Now, it's a pre-recorded video. You're not going to be able to, on video, respond to the questions that haven't come in yet, of course, but you can still have that interaction. And what's great about that is that if you're doing a live video and simultaneously trying to address comments coming into the box, it can get kind of choppy. It can disrupt the flow of what you're doing because, you know, someone asks a question that you know you're going to get into a couple minutes later. It can create not a great experience, not a very smooth experience. But doing pre-recorded video is great. You know, I will say though, this isn't pre-recorded. We're not pulling the wool over anyone's eyes here, but this is live. So if that comes into anyone's mind that, well, I don't have a team like they're doing today, you can still do some pretty cool things. You can still have that element of interactivity. That's important.
Yeah, and I think from a pre-recorded content, I think it's also really important to know that that's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that everybody who's listening, for the benefit of your own business and flexibility in the digital sphere, should pre-record a 1.5-minute bumper promo reel about yourself, your basics, your business. Think about if you were shooting your own 1.5-minute television commercial, or 30-second television commercial, or 1 minute long 45-second television commercial, however long you feel comfortable. If you have the time and the wherewithal, I would suggest doing a 15-second spot, a 30-second spot, a 45-second spot, a minute, and a 1.5 minutes. And the reason why is that, and you have those files pre-prepared, and this brings in and the reason why you want to do this is this becomes your digital business card that you can then basically integrate into other events. So say, because we've been talking a lot about like hosting your own virtual experience and what it takes to do that. But if you don't want to go to all the effort to host your own, or it's something that you're not comfortable with, you can still sponsor somebody else's virtual experience. And again, this brings it back to, what are some other brands that are out there, other companies that you respect, cross-pollination, look at them and go, hey, maybe I could sponsor their virtual event. It looks like they're going to have a similar demographic to the type of person that I'm going after. That would be a really great way to do it. Now, sponsorship engagement is something that a lot of people don't really understand yet in the virtual sphere because it's so new. When I first launched Candlelight Club, I had to take a pre-existing successful physical environment and then basically go, how do I bring this virtual? And then how do I bring my sponsors with me? Because the sponsor dollars can cover the costs of a lot of these virtual experiences, but there needs to be value for the sponsors in it, right? And so a lot of the things, if you're looking to sponsor something, additional to the logo placement and the thank yous and the interactive engagement, you can also go and say, hey, play my pre-recorded video. And it's something that from if you're sponsoring another event, it's just valuable to have, and it doesn't take a lot of money to put together. It just takes a few times of practice. And, even for our, on the scale of our events, I had a different financial company, National Bank, was a presenting partner for one of my big virtual national events. And we actually created for National Bank multiple layers of engagement, multiple rooms of interactivity, in terms of Candlelight Club. And we actually we partnered with a company out of San Francisco that's very tech progressive, that bases itself off of audio proximity. It's a whole new program, and you're going to see a whole bunch of, but the visual design features were completely customizable. So I custom graphic designed a space for National Bank. It was a pop-up art gallery. And then in that space, people could interact organically via this program. It's basically it's a virtual event space that could hold 150 people. And we had people walking, like actually moving around, talking organically via this program. But we could engage and interact with brands and partners in there. And so National Bank not only had pre-recorded video content from this incredible art gallery that they opened, Calgary, Contemporary Calgary, which actually just opened in Calgary, that they've been building for 5 years, and it opened a week before COVID had to shut it down again, which sucks. But they had this incredible grand opening and a huge, great video content from National Bank in the opening, but they've never had a chance to use it. So we gave us the link, we embedded the link, but then we also had a personalized message from the banking team. And you could click on that video and it came up as a 1.5 minutes going, thank you so much. We appreciate everybody staying safe. Here's what we're up to at National Bank. Here's how we're protecting your money. Here's what we're doing for charity. Here's how we're helping to socially lead from a technology standpoint. And we're progressively supporting the arts by supporting these types of events that you're experiencing right now. And something as simple as that came from the vice president of National Bank. He pre-recorded that to go inside within their virtual art gallery event space that we custom built for them. So it was National Bank branded. It was beautifully custom graphic designed. It looked like a pop-up art gallery, but when you came into the space, you click on the link and you get to actually learn, and you get to learn who's behind it and why, and watch a quick video. But a 1.5 minute video in that interactive event space was all that you needed, right?
Right.
And so keeping those video content components on hand are great for quick integrations into sponsorship opportunities, because a lot of these virtual events will also pop up quickly. And so you might not have the time necessarily to like pre-record something in time to capitalize on a potential last minute opportunity that would come up in a new virtual event sphere or a conference that you didn't know existed until like 2 weeks ago, because all of these things are really starting to emerge now. So having that pre-recorded content for about, think of yourself as making your own commercial for what you and your branding, I think is just a valuable asset to have as a digital business card.
That's an incredible point. So even if you're not running events, those videos are hugely, hugely powerful to have. And it also, in my experience, you might think, well, what am I going to do with them or whatever? Just the practice of sitting down and recording forces you to refine your message. It's the whole idea behind an elevator pitch. It's not just that you know what to say to someone if they ask you what you do, or that you know who to align with. It's not just for everyone else, it's for you as well. So if you've been, for instance, in your business for a very long time, you may have lost touch with what originally got you into the financial services industry, just by virtue of the fact that you're in it. You're around people who know it, and recording yourself talking about something that's important enough for you that you're probably spending most of your life thinking about it and talking about it with people. So it's important to you, I hope. Just getting a video of yourself talking about that can reignite something like you wouldn't believe, and really help you to refine what your message is. And this sort of comes back to the discussion around branding as well, that if you've put some thought, and hopefully a fair bit of thought, around who you are in the space, it makes it much easier to start thinking about what are those other organizations that you're going to align with, or other causes or sponsors or things like that. And it makes your message that much more powerful when you're reaching out to them to do something together. And so again, it will hopefully be a future session somewhere where we can talk about personal branding really at length. But I think it's worth, yourself and a day with a whiteboard with maybe some people that you trust or people that you do business with to really nail that down for sure. It really helps to smooth out everything else. So that's a great point about the videos. I'm curious if our hosts of the day, Philip and John, have any sort of burning questions that this discussion has brought to mind. Is there anything beyond? And I know there are things that are coming in through the chat box as well. But as gentlemen in the industry, what has this brought up? Any thoughts?
Great questions so far. It's something that gets talked about a ton, of how do we walk the line of compliance in our industry, because it is hefty. The regulators are in our business a lot, and for good reason. We're dealing with people's life savings, but this move to virtual puts firms in a really weird position, because they want to monitor everything we're saying, right? This is why we have to approve any print ad or big email chains and that sort of stuff. So to be able to create our own little broadcast booth to start having virtual events is not the easiest thing to implement, depending on the firm you're at or the products that you're trying to put out there. Have you seen anything in that space that anyone's pushing the envelope, or how did they get this stuff implemented in a timely manner?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. First of all, thanks, John. But I think, I think the first thing to do would be like, ask your firm if they have a plan for it already, because there might be a template that they're currently working on that, not everybody knows about yet. A lot of big companies are at the moment realizing that they need to shift all of their big internal meetings into virtual. This is something that nobody rushed to do. I think the way when COVID first hit, because nobody really knew how long they were going to have to deal with this for. And as the summer went on, a lot of brands and big companies who were conservatively holding back on marketing spends or tourism budgets or planning, in terms of conferences and all those types of like events. They're like, okay, well, we're not going to shift anything. We're not really going to change it because we don't know how long this is going to go for. Maybe it won't last that long. But now that we're into the late summer and the fall and people are realizing, yes, the second wave is a thing. Yes, there's more lockdowns coming. And now all the government officials are basically saying, along with the doctors, that are like, okay, at least through the end of 2021, people are going to be gathering in large numbers virtually. It might be till April at the very earliest before sports are even back. So you have to understand that like virtual it's not going away, obviously, and it's going to be something that's really important to continue to work towards. And I think that companies are realizing this. So I would expect, or at least understand, that most big companies and firms would have some sort of a plan being worked on right now from the executive office level. And if they're not, the question would be prompted to go, hey, well, why aren't you? And if you can't, and if you aren't developing, something on an overarching company-wide level of consistency, maybe you could give us some guidelines internally of how we can manage those protocols while experimenting with virtual, because we believe that this is a very valuable way to increase our potential client roster and increase the level of connectivity with our clients. And is there a protocol on how to interact? Even at the very least, is there like a set template of 10 Zoom backdrops that are cool, that are pre-approved, that we can use, or like an invitation template that, their internal graphic design team compartment could go, hey, you know what, hosting a virtual event, here's the graphic template and you can insert your time and links here. I think that there's ways that if you can go back to the firms and ask them and probe them about what assets they have, but also ask them the right questions, so that, because based off of what you think you're going to actually need, and go, can you deliver this for us? And if not, can I get the green light to develop it on my own based off of a pre-existing template? And I think that would be the most effective way to kind of go about doing that.
And I'll jump on that as well, Tyson. And I nodded a lot on that last point you just made, which is, how do you put yourself in a position with your compliance department? And again, this is sort of culture dependent. It depends on the culture of your company, of sort of how removed your compliance is from sort of the on the ground. But to say, if there isn't something in place already, or even if there is, but it's constantly being developed, can you volunteer to have your voice as part of those discussions and say, I'm actively researching ways that we can bring our practice more virtually, because obviously that's the way things are going, at least in the short to mid-term. But even once things are all said and done, hopefully when all things are said and done, we will have so drastically changed our expectations when it comes to virtual, that when all of this blows over, virtual will still be very much a big piece, much more than it was pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. And so having that conversation with the company itself to say, I'm actively researching, not just for my own client base, my own business, but having that conversation around market share, that, look at the big box stores right now. It really is a race. Whoever does it best first will have so much more access to market share after the fact. And those that are not good at online sales, for example, are the Sears of the world, are the Targets of the world, that aren't really all that good at doing that, versus some of the other companies that are really doing well because they are seeing where things are going. And so having that conversation with the company to say, if you're having questions or having a meeting about this, I'd love to be a part of that, because every day I'm researching, I'm attending virtual events, not only in this industry, but in other industries. Tyson, you mentioned real estate. That's, if you think about sort of sister industries where you could look to and say, well, what are they doing? What are they doing that's really getting people moving and earning that market share, and putting yourself in a position to really succeed, and learning from that. And so what you said, I think, is spot on. So not only inquiring, and I would say inquire early. you might not have a plan at all right now, but I would suggest that if anyone who's watching this right now intends to do virtual events in the future, reach out now. Reach out to your compliance departments to say, this is something I'd like to start looking into doing. What's available now? Rather than waiting until you'd really, really like to do it. Because as was said, the turnaround time, depending on the company you belong to, it could be a bit of a wait, especially if it's something that they haven't greenlit already. And then another point on that as well is, if there is an advisor, someone at your company, doesn't matter where, it could be on the other side of the country, who has done something that looks really interesting that you wouldn't think would get an easy yes from the compliance department, reach out to that person to say, how did it go? You know, what kind of pushback did you get? Did you get any pushback? And how did that happen? Because that will inform the way that you move forward with compliance. And finally, I would say, try not to get too dissuaded if it is a little bit of a difficult track to get there. You know, we're all learning how to cope with this. I know, Tyson, you've already said it's cliche to say it's the new it's the new normal, but certainly the bigger, I would say, more bureaucratic places, it takes time to get the approvals needed in order to put something really cool together and actually get it out there and launch it. So be a bit patient, but at the same time, act now. I think Gary Vaynerchuk talks about that. You know, have patience, but be urgent. Act now and get the ball rolling, because, you know, if what we're saying here is true, that this is not going to be over in 3 months, that this is going to be a lasting thing, imagine if you start now, how much further ahead you will be in this space come a year from now, or come 18 months from now, versus a lot of other people in the space. Will you have access to more market share because you have taken the necessary steps now to become not only an expert in your subject matter, but an expert in the tools, an expert in the medium, and doing exactly what Tyson's talked about, of putting some consideration into your backdrop. I say that, and I've got pretty much nothing going on here. Look at Tyson's backdrop. It's much nicer. But think about these things, you know, and while people might say, and, you know, it may be true that TV is on its way out, what's not on its way out is what TV has accomplished with respect to getting people, well, not engaged, but watching. So Jimmy Fallon's a great example. Jimmy Fallon, host of The Tonight Show, moved to his home to keep doing the show while at home. He's now moved back to his studio, but he's wearing his at-home clothes. So he's got the backdrop, but obviously they've had discussions that, you know, the suit and tie now isn't as relevant as it was prior. So wear your jeans and your runners and your sweater, but we're going to put you in the studio. So those things don't happen by accident. So these are worthwhile things to pay attention to and to notice and to try to apply to your own practice, to your own business and marketing efforts.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point in terms of, you know, applying all of those tactics and considering, you know, how like the content goes. But I think one of the other interesting things to do just at a base level, and, you know, it's great because we're all on Zoom right now and everybody's very familiar with that, is if you're even remotely interested in looking into virtual events or hosting your own, take some time and just, you know, maybe you're a tech inclined person, maybe you're not. If you are tech inclined, take some time to demo a few of these new platforms that are coming out. You know, if you want, I can send you a list of a couple ones that I think are really good right now. High Fidelity being one, Topia being another one, that are super cutting edge. And these might be way more than anybody that you need. But these types of immersive environments are going to become more and more and more popular. So just even learning how to use them before you get engaged, it'll probably take you, you know, a little bit of time to kind of figure it out. But the more comfortable you are in this sphere with these types of new emerging technologies, the more opportunities you're going to be able to find to utilize them to your benefit, right? And so I think ultimately people are going to be thrust into this world more so, into the big, larger scale virtual events world. In this next year, you're going to see a ton of conferences that are corporate conferences that are just mandatory. You know, it's like, hey, 900 people, we got to get together. You're all joining this virtual event. That's one of the elements that we're working on right now is a lot of these big companies that are shifting. I mean, these are brands and massive brands that, out of the US that have $3 million event budgets. It's like these big annual corporate gatherings that you would fly across to Miami for, that just can't happen anymore, right? But these people still need to gather. And a lot of these companies are going to be going, well, you're coming to that, right? They spend the money because they make it mandatory, right? And so these virtual events are going to become mandatory. So just getting used to how these platforms work is going to be just a valuable skill set, just even for your own experience, so that when you decide you want to go check out a financial or investment conference that you're not hosting, but you just want to go check it out and see what other people are doing, the more comfortable you are with that, the better you'll be able to actually secure your brand and business and take advantage of all these new marketing opportunities that are emerging, right?
And I would say that this is a very soft plug, but certainly reaching out to Tyson or myself, in addition to checking out these events, but just for a question, what do you think about this? I'm thinking about that. I think that's, I would imagine, Tyson, you're open to that, having questions come into your inbox from the attendees here of what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. And I know, Christy, you just sent out a note about what were those names again, and Bill as well. But those two specific companies, they're both out of San Francisco. One is called High Fidelity. It's still in beta. It's the program that I used for Candlelight Club most recently for one of my most recent events. Very cool, very interactive. But it's still in beta, which means it's not a finalized version yet. And so therefore they're not actually, they're still adding tweaks to it. And so if you go in right now, it's highly experimental, but it's just kind of cool to check out. So you can go to their website and just check it out and play around. Another one that's really cool is called Topia. Their website is topia.io. And they work off of video and audio proximity, but the way that they've graphically designed it, it actually looks like a black and white pencil sketch storybook. And you can, but it's got video embedded. So you can, and that thing can hold 5,000 people simultaneously. And as you walk up and down and move your little avatar stick through 2D stick figure guy through this immersive world, which is all custom created, you can basically click on different links that are embedded, and you can go check out like different music and go check out different types of things. And, granted, this is obviously nothing to do with the financial sphere now, but these are the types of programs that are emerging very rapidly, that a lot of virtual event producers such as my agency or a lot of big brands like Nike and EA and a whole bunch of these other companies are shifting into these types of programs. So that the adoption rate amongst basically like 50 and under is going to be huge. And then it'll take a little bit more time for everybody else to adopt it. But these are the things that are coming down the pipe. So it's just good to know about them in general.
That's great. And I would say as well, I mean, I love that you mentioned those. I hadn't heard of the second one, so I'll definitely be checking that out. That sounds really neat. And you mentioned, these aren't, they don't have anything directly to do with the financial services industry. But what's really important to note is that consumer behavior and consumer expectations are changing across the board. And so changes in one industry affect expectations for another. And so saying that, well, no one else in my industry is doing that, so why would I bother? It's because it doesn't have anything to do with the industry. It has to do with the end customer. If they've just gone through several really amazing, interesting, dynamic online events and then come to yours, they don't care that no one else in your industry isn't doing cool things. They care if you're doing cool things. And so it's important to think about that, and also that take into account that you yourselves are consumers as well. What brings you joy? What delights you when you're online and participating in these things? Integrate those as opposed to strictly looking at within your own industry, because I would say that certainly there are industries that are always at the cusp, always pushing and ensuring that people are really, really enjoying themselves. And I would say look to those, which again, that comes back to your personal and professional brand as well, and what fits, what sort of delivery method fits with that. There was a great line, and someone put it in the chat box if they know who said this, because I heard it on some podcast and now I can't remember who said it, but that if Nike developed a hotel, I have a pretty good idea of what that hotel would be like. I can picture it. I feel like I know what the experience would be like staying at that hotel. If Hyatt developed a running shoe, I have no idea what it would be like. I don't know what they would do with that. And that's because the Nike brand has done such a good job of establishing what they are. And so if there's any number of products that they could develop that would fit right in with their brand, because they've done such a good job of establishing it. So that's just sort of something to think about. But yes, thank you, Tyson, for bringing those two up, High Fidelity and Topia.
Yeah, and they operate differently. They're, again, both are still in beta, which is cool. So they're actually free to go check out, which is really neat. So they don't charge to check it out right now. I think that's going to change in the next couple weeks. So it's definitely cool it's a good time to go check it out. But there are hundreds of these types of platforms that are going to be evolving and emerging over the next little while. So, I think that's kind of like the best way to look at it, is understanding that the virtual events world is many, many things. It's just like when you're hosting a regular event, you want to pick a venue that speaks to you, that speaks to your clientele, that makes sense. Well, these platforms effectively become your event spaces, right? They're replacing, if you're going virtual, they're replacing, what you would normally do in a conference room, or what you would normally do at a restaurant. Or at a live venue. So if you look at these different platforms, think of it as like venue hopping, and you're just kind of going, oh, what venue is the best fit for me? Right. And that's why, when you look at something like High Fidelity, that's a bird's eye view, that's got audio proximity, maybe that's something that's better for a conference type of event. But then if I want a really deep immersive experience, I'll go to something like Topia that has much more visual graphic narrative, and you weave through it. And maybe that's the way that I like to sell or speak to my clients. It's through a much more storytelling type of engagement. And I really touch base with my clients on a personal level instead of more of a quick hit, kind of volume level. So you're going to find that there's all these different styles of platforms that are currently available and are emerging that, you can best suit to your own style of how you want to present your brand and how you like to discuss your knowledge about finance. And find the one that's best for you, really, at the end of the day.
Excellent.
It's just brilliant. There's a couple of comments on here just on what the next steps might be. So we're going to send out a thank you to everyone for attending, of course. Include your guys' contact in there. I also mentioned that, again, this is timely. We're trying to be proactive in planning out what next year is going to look like. We're kind of restructuring our entire program to think that the world has changed once and for all forever. We've kind of done the 10-year of tech in 6 months of development, the virtual world, the event space. So we're trying to work with our local chapter sponsors to really come up with a program that is going to be innovative, completely unique, and engaging for everybody. So we want to hear your feedback, some of these technologies and tools, but we're going to be leaning on and reaching out to Peter and Tyson and some other speakers that we've had too on what next year is going to look like. So I just want to also thank Jonathan. Jonathan Helm is kind of his first official event introducing us to Tyson. We want to hear from you on what speakers would be good for these kind of events. We want to bring this where you're owning the education series through the chapter. So huge round of applause to Jonathan for stepping up. He's helping us here at the program side as well. So from this year, just how incredible it's been a lot of work to put these events on. So, thanks for helping. Tammy's also on here. She's sent us a number of speaker requests. So we want to hear from you guys on who we should be, connecting with and then making unique experiences like this. So I think the conversation was a great format. Thanks for making that happen. Actually, I was listening to Simon Sinek earlier, and he said, I'm not talking at people anymore. I will only do interview style presentations going forward. So all this is kind of changing. It's made me think about me personally, where maybe I'll have an open forum on Fridays where clients can just call in or send messages. And it's almost like, I could just answer questions as we go. What's happened, this week, kind of do a timely, this is what's happened in the markets, newsletter each week kind of thing. But could I have it more interactive where we've just seen the throne speech and the market's kind of dipped a little bit right afterwards? What are thoughts going forward? So thanks to everybody. We want to hear from you. So right now more than ever, and why kind of, talking about this topic is we are developing the program into next year. We want to hear from you. So any ideas you have of what Tyson and Peter have talked about, what we want to implement, we want to put that going forward. So you'll have their contact. There'll be a lot going on. So without further ado, thank you guys so much, Peter, Tyson, for your expertise, obviously just the insights, and then how much it's going to change going into next year. So thanks for being here with us here today,
you.
guys.
No, thanks for having us, Philip and John. Appreciate it.
It's great.
So.
We'll be in touch more often. Any questions, aim them over to us. I know I put our email address, the Advocates Vancouver Island chapter, for any comments, and we'll see everyone very soon for update coming up here in October. So thank you guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Thank you.